Hi everyone, this is Peter Dimov, and here with me are Martin Krönke and Rens Broekman. The topic of today's webinar is Racecraft. It's a very popular and important topic. Martin will talk about it from the perspective of prototypes and formula cars, and Rens from the perspective of GT3 cars. Most of you probably already know who Martin and Rens are, but they're Qantas Sim Sport drivers and virtual racing school coaches. Really great guys, and a lot you can learn from them. So let's get started. Let's start with some generic topics, and then we'll go into some more specific questions. So number one, how do you approach the race start and the first lap? Maybe Rens, you can start, and Martin, you can chime in whenever you want to add something.
Yeah, I will. Thank you. Hello, everybody. How to approach a race or race start? Well, first of all, it actually already sort of starts before the race. To sort of have a general game plan of what you want to do. I would say every race, in general, to get the best result, your main goal should be basically just to race your own race. By doing that, or by trying that, it's usually the best way to be doing your fastest race possible, which obviously will usually get you the best result. Also, before the start, even, just make sure you try not to lose any time, car or group, at the very moment the race starts. And the race starts itself, including lap 1. My main focus, and I think that's what a lot of people do, is actually not necessarily to gain places, but number one is to not lose places. So maintaining position is key. Of course, when the opportunity is there and you can gain a place, it can be a big plus. But a lot of the times it is very easy to lose more than there is to gain, simply by being out of position and losing momentum. Another easy way to lose a lot is to get into trouble, and even more so if you get damage. So it's really important to avoid that. So always try to be cautious, be able to react to very unpredictable situations in front. Usually the further you're back on the grid, so the more cars you have in front, the more cautious you need to be. But don't always only look ahead. Always be sort of aware of the cars behind as well, because they still need to react to your movements as well. In a start for a GT car, for example, one of the things I do is usually leave a little bit of margin to the cars in front. That way, when you approach a braking zone, you don't get caught up by some very hard or early braking, or at least you have some time to react. And it also enables you to brake slightly early, but not as hard, which makes you a little bit more predictable for the cars behind. So that way you can sort of try to avoid car contacts and trouble early on in the race.
While you're on the topic, is there anything you can do to protect yourself from the cars behind you? Or do you pretty much have to trust them they won't do anything stupid?
Well, in a way, you have to trust them to not do anything stupid. Always try to be very predictable. So don't try to switch lines at the very last moment, especially into the first two corners or hard braking zones in lap 1. usually a lot of people tend to choose the defensive line or the defensive side of a corner, which is usually the best way. Obviously, when a lot of people are doing that, there might be an opening on the other side. But in general, it's just yeah, you have to put trust in the cars around you.
Any other high-level tips for lap one?
Well, like I said, always try to stay out of trouble. I can't repeat that enough, really. But yeah, always just try to get as close to the cars in front as you can, and just put yourself in the best position possible. But don't be overly aggressive, because it is very easy to lose out a lot on lap one.
I found myself running off track a few times just because I'm not really used to running a different race line. Is that something you need to practice? Is that something you practice yourself, or have you practiced it in the past so that you know how to go around different line?
Well, a good way of practicing different race lines or racing other cars is just in an open practice server, especially if you know if you know people in there. But in a way, it's also something which is very important if you race in a close group, is to sort of be aware of the track, even if you sort of have to drive blind, and not get sort of drawn into the same mistakes as the car in front. In a GT car, for example, don't use the cars in front brake lights as your brake marker, because when he makes a slight misjudgment, if you use his brake lights as a marker, you will make the exact same mistake. Which, especially if in a close group with similar paced cars, that might be one of the few chances you get.
Okay. Martin, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just a couple of things that are sort of mainly targeted towards higher downforce cars and especially Formula One cars. One thing that is kind of important for the first lap is to be aware that due to the standing start, there might be a lot bigger speed differentials, and you sort of need to be a lot more aware or a lot more focused on spotting cars that have started in front of you, which might have gotten a much worse start than you and might be very slow. So you should be prepared to sort of react to a car that is much slower than you, and you sort of need to pay a lot of attention to not hit that car, but also not just if you see it swerve to the right hand side or the left hand side or whichever way you want to go, and then take out cars that are already beside you. So that's something you should definitely always keep in mind at a race start. And the other thing, which is sort of linked to the possibility of a lot more different downforce levels being possible in the higher downforce cars than, let's say, compared to a GT3 car, where most cars essentially run a very similar pace and have very similar capabilities. In Formula cars, you might run into situations where cars are either much better in the straight or much better in the corners. So you might get caught out by the different braking points or different corner speeds if you, for example, have a car that, in front of you that has much less downforce on it and is essentially quicker in a straight but pretty bad in under braking and a lot worse in cornering. It's sort of something you need to be aware of, that people might be slower initially in the corners, and if you just do your normal race pace in the beginning, you might just run into the back of them. So that's something you sort of need to be aware of in lap one as well, to maybe not push it as hard as you could possibly do when you're driving on your own, but rather just look what the others are capable of in the first couple laps, and then adjust your driving accordingly for the rest of the race.
How do you balance being careful and losing positions at the start? Rens said in the beginning that your goal for lap one would be to not lose positions, but I guess if you're overly conservative, careful, you just present opportunities to the drivers behind to pass you. So how do you balance?
Well, it's kind of a difficult question to answer. Usually, that sort of highly depends on how the start itself is going. If you're if you qualified on the front row and let's say you're not under very big threat from behind, you can sort of be a little bit more aggressive and maybe rather focused on maybe trying to go for P1 for the first corner. Whereas if you have a bad start, I would always recommend just being, a little bit more careful. I mean, if you get a reasonably bad start, you will just be under threat from lots of different cars that are trying to go past you. And I just try to be relatively conservative. You obviously want to go for a rather defensive line, so not everyone has an easy shot at you and is going past you easily. But at the same time, you shouldn't really enforce everything and try to, keep the place no matter what price you pay. Because after all, especially in the Formula cars, a contact in the beginning might very well end your race. In a GT3 car, that can also happen, but the chances are a lot higher that the car is somewhat surviving it with relatively low damage. Whereas in the Formula car, if, let's say, the rear wing is gone, it's gone for good. No one is going to repair it, and the race is basically over.
Yeah, indeed. What Martin says, the GT cars are obviously a little less prone to damage to an extent that it will end the race. So you can get away with a little bit more. And in terms of holding your place, I would always, like Marta said, choose a somewhat defensive line and always let them go the long way around, basically. And just try to hold your place. And if you can't, also like Martin says, it's the same for GT cars. Just you at some point you have to concede. So.
That's a good segue into one of the other topics we had, which is car position and how to hold your place. So can you talk a little bit more about what's a good defensive line and what's not a good defensive line in terms of racing and what's just not cool to do?
Yeah, of course.
Blocking, for example, or maybe other examples too.
Yeah, blocking is seen as a big no-no, and blocking is basically reactive defense. So when you move after the car behind you has made his move, that can be seen as blocking. So always try to be preemptive. So make your move before the car behind. That's very predictable. So you don't cause any unnecessary incidents or trouble. And in general, although it is really dependent on the track and corners, but in general, the inside line is the preferred line. So yeah, always try to make sure you can cover the inside line. Like I said, it's really track dependent. Sometimes you have to be concentrate a little bit more ahead of the track. So always try to think a couple of corners ahead and what's coming next. Sometimes the inside line will give you a very slow exit, so then the outside line might be actually better. But the key things is.
Do you pay attention to the gap? I guess if you have sufficient gap, you may not really need to be driving a defensive line. But I guess.
Well, it is very important to leave your defense for one as late as possible, because when you move off into a sort of defensive position, you will go off the ideal racing line. So you sort of slow yourself down. And so you want to leave it late. And at some point, although that's really dependent on the car and track combo, at some point the gap is too big for them to attempt, because they have to be somewhat alongside, I would say, before the apex or at the apex, maybe even before turn-in. At some point they don't get the overlap. The only thing they can do is hit you.
Mm-hmm. So essentially, you don't really set up for a defensive line from the beginning or the middle of the straight, but more towards the end. If you see that the car is approaching,
Well, but I mean the proximity of the car behind. So don't start to defend when there's still a big gap.
mhm.
So it is a really fine line to judge, because you don't want to leave the inside open for too long, because it might give him the opportunity to go for it.
Do
So
you
it's something you need that needs practice as well.
do you pay attention to what is the actual time gap in the F3 box? Do you use that as some sort of indicator, or mostly just based on what you see in the mirrors?
I race based on my mirrors, not on my F3, but I do use my F3 for different purposes, but not in terms of actual racing.
Mm-hmm. So no blocking defensive line means just taking the inside.
Well, not necessarily taking the inside, but make your move early enough that it is before the attacker's move.
Like you said earlier, you need to be predictable. So
Yeah.
if the person behind should know that you're defending and should know what your line is, and you
Yeah.
can be going left and right all the time.
Yeah, and you want to basically choose the line you prefer into the corner. So if you want to have the apex, you usually want to have the inside.
Yep.
If I may add something to that topic, it sort of depends on the track, as you said earlier already. There are a couple of sort of exceptions where maybe the inside line isn't necessarily the preferred line. If you, for example, have a right-hander which is followed by two left-handers, it might actually be reasonable to sort of stay on the outside and try to hang on to the driver that's trying to overtake you and sort of try to hang on the outside line. But you then, for the next two corners, have the inside line, and therefore you should probably be able to fight back immediately. That's something you could maybe consider.
Yeah, indeed.
Let's move on to the next topic, which is racing in a closed group, whether it's at the start or later on in traffic. So let's start with when you're first few laps, you're typically in a closed group of cars, similarly paced.
Yeah, well, it can happen throughout a whole race. Usually, it will happen somewhat near the earlier parts. But also the thing you mentioned earlier, it is really important to not get unnecessary off tracks or make unnecessary mistakes. Because a small mistake and a small time loss, when there's a group of cars that are really close together, let's say within a second and a half or a second, if you lose half a second on one straight, it's easy to lose multiple places, which then may be really hard to get back later on. I would say always try to get as close to the or stay as close to the leader of the group as possible. If you have the pace, you obviously want to be the leading car of the group. But in general, I would always try to stay as close as you can. And more importantly, don't try for an overtake which might actually lose you positions. Sometimes it's really easy in braking zones, for example, when there are cars close. You need to brake quite a bit earlier because everybody will sort of bunch up. So it can give a good opportunity to make a pass, but if cars defend well, you might find yourself on the place on the track where you actually again lose a lot of momentum and a little bit of time and lose position to the cars behind. So it's quite important to be aware that the cars behind don't get the opportunity, because you can be very vulnerable by small mistakes.
I guess especially early on in the race, when you're close to, say, 2-3 cars, there's 2-3 cars in front of you, and they're not necessarily driving their ideal lines because maybe one car is defending, the other one brakes too early, you have to adjust your braking as well. So just by nature of following a couple of other cars, that makes you more vulnerable. Is there something you can do? I mean, you're already early on the brakes, and maybe the car behind, if it's close enough, it can just decide to try to outbrake you. Is there anything you could do?
Yeah, well, if there are a couple of cars in front and you need to brake that early that you feel vulnerable, you can always try to move to a defensive line, not necessarily. The car in front will maybe start moving over as well because you think you might attack him.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, that should work pretty well. And if the cars in front of you are actually fighting for position, then quite often you see that they could lose quite a bit of time. So be aware of that. Brake early, leave a bit of space, and try to use the opportunity if it presents itself. If they go side by side through a corner, for example, they will both have quite a slow exit. So if you then if you see that that happening in front, then you can sort of focus on the exit better and maximize that, and maybe get the opportunity to mix yourself in that fight, or even just get them both.
I've noticed what you mentioned, that if you actually choose a defensive line, the car in front might think you're trying to pass them, even though you're not even side by side with them, and sometimes they just keep the door open. When do you know when someone behind you is just showing their nose? How is there any way to know whether you can close the door or whether you should keep it open? I guess to be conservative, many people just keep the door open, but they might not even have they might not have the speed to really make a pass, and essentially you're giving up a place if you're too conservative.
Yeah, I personally, if someone really sticks his nose in between me and the apex quite late, I still always try to leave the space purely to survive, really, to not get spun around.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, they won't get far enough alongside to actually make the move stick, so it will just cost you both time.
Mm-hmm.
You don't necessarily lose the position.
Okay, so
yeah, if that happens once, the next time I would choose to go a little bit more defensive to make sure he doesn't do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's something that yeah, you have to sort of read the race for that. That makes sense. Sort of read the cars behind.
Yeah, so if they don't really have the speed or they're not side by side, you initially might just keep the door open, but they shouldn't have enough speed to make the pass. So it's better to be safe than sorry and try to close the door and get hit.
Yeah, I would say in GT cars it might be a little bit different to a Formula car, but it happens quite often that people at least try to stick their nose in to sort of unsettle the car in front, not with touching, but just by getting him offline a bit.
Just psychologically getting you nervous.
Yeah, well, it might help for the car behind to slow the car in front down a bit in the next part of the track.
Mm-hmm.
As you get him offline in the corner, it obviously is not his preferred line, so it might be a little bit slower in the next part of the track or the next corners.
Mm-hmm.
You could also sort of, by forcing someone off the line, or at least trying to get someone off the ideal racing line, just make the tires a little bit worse. I guess that's maybe a little bit more relevant for the MP430, as that car is really kind of tire wear dependent, and tire wear is basically the biggest factor in everything. It sometimes can also be useful to just show that you want to overtake. People might get nervous, might get a little bit offline, might have a little bit more wheel spin exiting the corner, and if you do that for a couple laps, you might have them in a position where the tires just don't provide the traction anymore, and you can sort of attempt a much easier pass coming up to, maybe out of a corner that leads to a long straightaway. You can actually make use of the improved traction at that point. And one thing that I was sort of waiting to say about the whether or not you should sort of move over and close the door if someone is close enough and sometimes showing himself in the mirror. That's also something that you sort of basically just have to read out of the situation. Sometimes people are doing that regularly but never really attempt to pass. So at that point you maybe could just stay on the ideal racing line, although that sort of leaves you vulnerable for some sort of surprise move. If people basically just always show them themselves in the mirror and don't do anything, you might get tricked into, oh, well, he's not going to overtake anyway, and then suddenly he actually tries to, and you're unprepared and sort of have, no chance of really avoiding it anymore.
I guess over time you also get to know the drivers and what their style is, what their experience is. So I guess especially if you race in the World Championship Series, you get to know the drivers. So at this point, it's probably easier compared to when you're in a session with a bunch of people you race with for the first time.
Yeah, definitely. When you race a series where you race the same people over and over, makes it a lot easier to read, of course, because people tend to do this or show similar behavior in races. You will also see that some cars are a little bit easier in terms of how they deal with track position. Some cars fight really hard early on. So you get familiar with those situations.
Okay, cool. There was a question on the thread about how do you approach traffic in a multi-class event. Yeah, let's start with multi-class, and then maybe we can also discuss about single class. When do you choose to be aggressive, either as a slower or faster car, and when do you choose to play nice with the slower cars? So Martin, maybe you can talk about prototype cars, and Rens about GT3.
Yeah, okay. Do you start, Martin, with the prototype?
I can start. Basically, in order to you choose to be aggressive or play nice, I personally almost never really choose to be aggressive unless there is a car very close to me that is sort of would have the chance to overtake me. Then you can maybe go for a little bit more risk. But if you just want to go for optimized lap time and you sort of can afford to lose maybe a couple seconds behind the car, or in one corner maybe lose a little bit of time without being at risk of being overtaken, I'd always go with a play nice version, and then just try to look as far ahead as you possibly can. So if you, for example, see, okay, there's a car in front, let's say it's a relatively slow GT car that is, I don't know how much off pace compared to a prototype car, but you're about to hit it mid-corner. Then it might be reasonable to just say, okay, good, I'm going to go off the throttle a little bit earlier, coast a little bit, save a little bit of fuel, and then just try to set up the corner in a way that you don't sort of have to overtake the car right in the middle of the corner, but rather at the exit of the corner. So you can take the corner as you would normally do, take a lot of speed out of the corner, and then just take a little bit of a tighter line while the GT car is tracking out. You just basically overtaking on the inside without the GT car losing any time, and you also don't really lose all that much time, because at some point it's an efficiency game in endurance racing most of the time, and if you can save fuel that way, you could maybe over a stint easily extend the stint for maybe one, maybe even 2 laps. So it usually, if you just go by lap time, it's almost never really efficient to go very aggressive against the slower classes. It's almost in all cases better to just be nice to them and sort of find a reasonable place where you don't really give up time for the corner exit. You can maybe give time on corner entry, but always try to optimize the corner exit and the following straightaway so that you don't run out of momentum there.
Okay, that makes sense. And the exception would be if you have a car in your class following you closely, then would you try to make the pass at the end of the straight?
I'd rather, the chance is higher that I would try to maybe do it at the end of the straightaway. Although then if you do that, it's always very important to just indicate as soon as you possibly can to the slower class that you want to do that. So don't really try to run in the slipstream until the very last moment, but rather sort of move out of their slipstream relatively early so that they can spot and maybe interpret it that way, that you might go for the inside line on the corner entry, and yeah, just make sure that they don't get caught out in surprise. Just indicate what you're going to do. That's the same for the slower class, I guess, most of the time, to just be as predictable as you possibly can. But yeah, when a car is right behind you in the same class and it's a fight for position, you sort of have to be a little bit more aggressive most of the time.
Are these slower cars expected to lift off and let you, or move out of the way, or not? Is it not really the case?
Usually not. I mean, I've seen drivers that sort of did that just because they were sort of anticipating that two faster cars might slip through, and in order to not lose any time, because you're sort of forced off the ideal racing line, they just lift on the straightaway that you go and then go on with their stuff. But that's nothing that you should ever sort of expect them to do. If they do it, nice, that's a good bonus. But don't expect it. The slower classes race their own race, and usually it's just, yeah, the responsibility of the faster classes to get around safely. They are never really supposed to leave the racing line for you. You need to find a way past. Okay. Usually that's not all that difficult if the speed difference is big enough, but that can also lead to a little bit of a problem, because sometimes in some races you have multi-class events where the lap time difference is kind of great, but the straight line speed is minimal. Maybe GT1 kind of HPD comes to mind, where the difference is primarily there in cornering, which then sort of makes it a little bit difficult.
So what do you do in that case?
You
have to be more aggressive?
Sort of. You're just basically a lot more limited in terms of where you can do it. It's a little bit more difficult to get it done at the end of the straightaway, and you're basically either forced to just drive behind the car in the corner, or try to do it around the outside on a very long corner, although that's always risky. If the car on the inside has a mishap and runs wide, the chance is kind of high that they take you out. It can happen. They're usually your best bet is then to just out accelerate the cars. Usually the HPD is just faster in acceleration, and yeah, you basically just have to wait until the end of the corner and then out accelerate them.
Okay, Rens?
Yeah, in terms of from a GT perspective, in having the faster cars on track, a lot of similar things actually apply. Yeah, like Martin said, it's the faster car's responsibility to make a safe pass. However, it doesn't mean that as a GT driver you can simply ignore the cars behind you. So the best thing to do is basically just to let them overtake you like any other car would normally overtake you.
What do you mean exactly?
Well, when they just race your normal racing line, and when you see a car coming up behind and he's making the move, just give him all the room he needs and just basically try to slot in behind him again. So basically behave the same way as you would as a car in a similar class would pass you, and you would just basically let him go. Just give him the room they need, but more importantly, be predictable. So don't react to a car coming up fast behind you. If you move offline at the very last moment, the chances are really high that the car behind you already has set its mind on going that same direction, which can cause some hairy moments. So just always basically just try to let him through. And if there are cars close when they're racing for position, the faster classes, as a GT driver, you should be a little bit more aware that they might be a little bit more aggressive as well, trying to get past. So if they're really close and they are about to pass me on a straight or a longer straight, I usually try to let them go past both at once by not necessarily braking early, but just by lifting off a little bit early. Also, like Martin said, it's a long race, so it will just help with your fuel consumption in endurance racing.
Is that a good example of when you look at the F3 box?
The F3 box is very good to sort of make you aware where they are on track, maybe. But the prototypes, the HPDs in particular, they can come up so quickly that they still might catch you out if you just pay attention to your F3. But it is something to keep an eye on, to simply know when they are sort of behind you.
So if you see a couple of higher class cars behind you, they might actually come up pretty quickly, but at least you know that there's two of them close to each other, and then you can...
Yeah, you can usually make up from your F3 that they are close, because you see a very similar gap between you and them.
Yeah.
But in general, you should always try to just be on your normal racing line, and if they don't make the move, just give him their line, and just slot in behind them again.
Mm-hmm.
Just always be as predictable as you possibly can be. The less predictable you are, or if you don't leave them any room, it might actually lose you a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
By if you sort of ignore them and just stick completely to your racing line.
Mm-hmm.
And also, when there are multiple cars coming past, you might find yourself sometimes that you not be able to actually make an apex completely. I would then always advise you basically just stick around that particular side of the track until the end of the corner, and just continue your racing line from there. That makes you the most predictable throughout the corner. If you suddenly, the very last moment, then still try to apex, it might make it unpredictable for a car behind.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about lapping cars that actually fight for position. So what's expected of them to do, and what do people actually do in practice, and how do you go around safely?
Oh, lap cars might be a little bit different in GTs compared to the Formula One series. Although they're both, well, according to the iRacing rules, they actually don't have to move. It's still the faster car's responsibility to make a safe pass. But quite often you will see that they will try to get out of your way. And a similar thing as what Martin said with the HPD, if you're actually fighting for position, you may be a little bit more aggressive. But I usually always try, in a GT car at least, to give them the time to move out of the way. So if you're in a difficult section of a track, or a place on the track where you normally don't really pass, just wait behind them onto the next straight or place where you can make a pass. And
I guess
you can expect them to either move over or just try to get past.
I guess it gets especially tricky if they're actually fighting for position and maybe going side by side and whatnot, and you have someone right behind you.
You mean if the cars that you're lapping?
Yes, the lapped cars
fighting?
are fighting for position, yeah. And you're fighting for position too, so I guess that's the most tricky situation.
Yeah, well then you usually are a little bit more rushed, so you're a little bit more aggressive. But quite often you will see that if there are only two cars, for example, fighting, it can give those cars a good opportunity to actually make a pass on the car that they are racing by letting the leaders pass and basically try to go with the leaders past them.
Mm-hmm.
So quite often that's not necessarily a big problem.
So this could be the lapping strategy for the lapped car that's behind.
Yeah, if you're getting lapped and you're fighting a car or you're stuck behind a car, and if you're stuck, that means you have the faster car, the faster pace, but for whatever reason, turbulent air or simply how the car behaves, you can't get past. Then in those situations, when a lapped car arrives or a car that is about to lap you, if you can slot in behind him and sort of follow him past the car in front of you, yeah, then the lead car basically have made the room for you.
Mm-hmm. Is it the same with the Formula cars, Martin?
Most of the cases, yes. Especially when looking at the last couple of races when I had to pass people that have been in a fight with another car as well. It usually seems to be the case that people, especially those that are sort of, let's say P20 and P21 are fighting against each other, then P21 is usually kind of easy on you and lets you pass fairly easily, and then just tries to hang on to you while you pass the car he was fighting before. So that usually is not that big of a deal, getting around lap traffic. They usually jump out of the way pretty easily and try to use you as sort of a little bit of a help to get past the car they were fighting before. Regarding if you're sort of in a fight yourself, let's say you have someone very close to yourself and people in front of you, that's obviously something where you need to be a little bit more aggressive than you would normally be. I usually do it in a way, if I have a little bit of a gap behind, especially if it's later in the race and there's no high chance of any, mix-ups due to pit strategies or anything. You basically, let's say 5 laps to the end, there's a 5-second gap. It's sort of manageable. Then I'd say don't be overly aggressive and put your nose in places when they're in a fight. But well, if it's close and you have someone right behind you, it might be necessary to just fill the car into a corner and sort of just basically overtake them like you would overtake a car that isn't lapped, just to make sure that you get past in time before, let's say, the guy right behind you racing you for position is sort of getting a benefit from it and passing you.
Okay, so I think that's brings us to the next topic, which is racing smart, picking your fights. I guess where you are relative to the cars you're racing is important. Whether you have a car immediately behind you or whether you're in the pitting stage and you really need the time. Otherwise, you might lose the position because of the pit stops. So yeah, what are some high-level guidelines for racing smart and when it's worth it?
Yeah, when it's worth it. If picking the right fights, I would say the longer the race, the more important it is. So especially in the longer endurance races, it is very easy to lose a lot of time by fighting. Again, by trying to make a move by going side by side, by moving off the line, you just lose a lot of time. And it might not always be worth it. You might be able to get that track position at that moment, but in the long run you might actually lose out because you've lost time for the next part of the race that you not necessarily can make up. So faster cars, when you know they are faster and it's still early in the race, and not necessarily always worth fighting, because 9 out of 10 times it's just a matter of time then for them. Yes, you might be able to hold the position for a couple of laps longer, but with the time you lost, you might be vulnerable to lose a lot more positions if you compared to then just letting that particular car go and try to follow him. But even if a car is maybe even a little bit slower, it might just be worth to let him have the place, so that way you don't lose or lose the least amount of time, and then try to repass him later. Obviously, you have to be careful that you're not getting stuck behind the car. Yeah, but apart from that, always make sure you only fight the cars that you're either gonna race later on in the race, or when you know they're actually costing more time if you sit behind them rather than trying to get past.
So when you have an opportunity, you think there's a gap that opens, what are the kind of things that go through your mind to evaluate whether you should go for it?
Well, I would always, well, not necessarily always, but I will most of the time still try at least once to see if you can get past if the opportunity presents itself. If you notice that he's actually fighting for it, you might be able to try once more. But as soon as you notice that that the fight is losing a lot of time, especially if that particular car's pace is quite good, then it might be worth to basically just back out of the fight and just try to follow him. Because all the time fighting, you are losing time to the other cars in front of that, or group in front of that, or maybe even a leader.
And you could be saving fuel behind. If the pace is decent, you can stay behind the car and save some fuel.
Yeah, especially on the faster tracks, fuel saving in the longer races, especially fuel saving can be quite a big factor. So yeah, you can use their the draft on the longer straights to lift off a little bit on the straights.
Martin, do you have anything to add?
I was just about to add the thing with the fuel saving, but you already took that away. Other than that, I don't think that I have anything to add at this point.
So my question is, you have to evaluate what's the opportunity. Like, is there a high chance you can make the pass? What's the risk? Is this a car you're actually fighting or not in the race? And you have to make this decision. Do you have to actually make this decision in a split second, or as you approach the car, you can already start deciding what your strategy would be, how much you would push, how aggressive you would be?
It all depends on the pace of that particular car. If he really slows you down, it should make him an easier target. So you're probably more likely to actually fight for it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're
make the pass if there is a non-trivial difference in pace, but if the pace is pretty much matched, then it's less.
If the pace is pretty much matched, I would say if it's really matched, it might be worth to save that fight for the very end.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, just almost sort of work together to not sort of disturb each other. So sometimes you can even when you're sort of, for example, following a car and he might think that you're trying to pass him, by backing out a little bit in the braking zones, you might show that you're not, and you're just following him.
Mm-hmm.
So that will give him the opportunity to just focus forward.
Mm-hmm.
And that way you can both just do your fastest laps and actually maybe catch or gain time of the cars in front.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing to consider in that regard is if there's still a round of pit stops to come, it might be smarter to just hang on and run in the draft and conserve a little bit of fuel and sort of save the fight for later, but not necessarily on track, but rather just in the last round of pit stops. If you're very close and have saved a good bit of fuel, you might be able to just take a little bit less fuel in the last pit stop. And by just having a shorter refuel time past the car in front by strategy in the pit lane, and then just have track position before the last stint.
Yeah, indeed.
Cool. So how do you go about setting up an overtake? So you're behind someone, you have better pace, and
Yeah, well, this again, I think a little bit different from the GTs and F1 with the DRS, but in general, the overtake, you should always be thinking a little bit further ahead, not just one corner. So you always want to make sure you actually can make the move stick, so you're not making yourself vulnerable for the next part. In general, you want to make your move quite late. That way you can make maximum use of a slipstream if that is there. And always make sure you are committed, and you should always sort of try to leave a little bit of margin so you can leave the other car room. Because it's very easy to go too hard into a corner and basically just completely run another car out of room, which yeah, is not so nice to do.
so you need to know when to brake so that you can actually hold and keep the inside line, leaving enough room, a car with on the outside.
Yeah, I would always try to leave to leave them some space, and depending on how aggressive your actual pass is, you might want to leave yourself some room to get out of it as well.
You
Because
mean back
sometimes,
out or?
yeah, back out of it, yes, because sometimes people are not aware that you are there and don't leave your room, which can cause yeah, unnecessary incidents or damage.
How do you back out of it? I mean, if you've already committed.
Well, don't be completely on the limit turning, and just try to yeah, leave a little bit of margin so you can brake a little bit more, or at least be aware that he might not be seeing you. Quite often you can not necessarily have to go slower into it, but you can brake a little bit more into a corner, and that way you avoid them because you just brake for a little bit longer. But always make sure you're a couple of corners ahead, so you can be sure you actually make the move stick.
So if you're not half car width side by side, would you back out? I mean, if you're just barely have your nose inside, would you back out? Like, when do you know it doesn't work, and when do you back out, and when do you go for it?
Well, in a race that can be really hard to judge, but in general, I would say at least have quite a significant overlap. I would say if the front wheels are past the rear wheels of the car in front, you have a proper enough overlap to actually stay there.
Yeah, you have or don't?
Yeah, I think when you have your front wheels in front of his rear wheels,
In front, okay.
yeah, I think that's proper enough overlap to stay there. But that's something you have to judge before you make the move. If you can get that far alongside, if you can't, you should not do it. But again, it's very hard to judge actually being on track.
Yeah, from the driver's perspective, is it just difficult to have a good sense of where you are relative to the other car, or?
It's sometimes hard to judge how far alongside or how long the nose sometimes is. Maybe it's different for the F1 car because you can see your wheels. In general, that can be quite tricky. But quite often, yeah, it sort of goes on feel, and you have to sort of judge it before it. And also what Martin said, depending on the track, you might be able to actually make the outside work simply because the next corner you're on the inside then. And that's also another reason why you always should be sort of thinking a couple of corners ahead.
Yeah. Martin, anything to add in terms of overtaking, how to set it up?
Well, for the F1 car, maybe. For the prototype cars, not so much, as the principle is pretty much the same. For the F1 car, there's maybe one thing that you should keep in mind, which might just make passing a little bit easier, and it's just something that you sort of can do as a setup preparation. That would be if you sort of are stuck and can't make a move stick that easily without spending energy or spending big amounts of energy. One way which might just make it easier is just hang on in DRS for a couple laps and recharge the battery as much as you possibly can, and then just try to sort of pick the DRS zone which is the most promising. Usually it's the longer the straight and the longer the DRS is open, the more promising it is, and also the slower the corner leading into the DRS zone is, the more promising it is, just because you can stay closer because of the dirty air having less of an effect in the slower corners. And basically just set it up in a way, recharge for a couple laps while staying in the DRS, which should allow you to be reasonably quick, but recharging battery quite a lot. And when you are actually trying to do the overtake, try to get close in the corner leading to the DRS zone, and then just spend as much energy as you really need to get as much of an overlap, or maybe even clear the car before the corner. That's obviously very dependent on what the downforce trim is. If you're on lower downforce, it can actually be the case that you have cleared the car already on the straightaway. If you're on a higher downforce than the car in front, it actually might be very difficult, or maybe even impossible, even with DRS, to do an overtake, just because of the straight down speed difference due to different downforce trims.
Mm-hmm. Cool. We have a question on the live stream. What are good ways to make the guy directly in front of you nervous and perhaps might provoke mistakes?
Well, in the GT cars, moving off the line, making them think you're about to pass will probably make them nervous. Like Martin says, if you do that too often, then it doesn't have any effect. But usually try to move around, try to make them focus on their mirror rather than in front. Can usually help quite a bit. And try to get them off the racing line, really. If you don't necessarily have the pace to actually make a straightforward pass as such, you have to try to get them offline, so that they slow basically themselves down.
Mm-hmm.
And making them nervous, yeah, just try to make them focus on you in a mirror, just so go for moves, but if you go for it, make sure you can always back out. So just that way you always put the pressure on.
Yeah. So it's really psychological. Make them think about you always being there in the mirrors, as opposed to where their breakpoints are, what the ideal racing line is.
Yeah, if you really want to sort of unsettle them, that's usually the best way. Another good way is actually to not do anything at all, as in not making them nervous, and then suddenly do make your move.
Mm-hmm.
But then they can be caught out as well.
Mm-hmm.
But you're suddenly there, and then they just have to concede the place.
Yeah. Okay, another question on the live stream. What are the biggest, most common mistakes you see new people make?
I guess that's related to Racecraft.
Yeah.
Okay. Rens, go ahead.
The biggest mistake people make, I would say the biggest mistake is losing a lot of time by fighting early on in the race, and which then maybe even lead to getting spun around or getting damaged, or just basically racing too hard early on. I think that's in GTs at least. I would say the most common thing you see.
Okay, what I was going to add is one thing that, especially in multiclass racing and endurance racing, has shown up a couple times, especially with newcomers to that type of racing, is just predictability. Most people, especially those in slower cars, are usually kind of unpredictable. People sometimes don't really stick to the racing line, which they're usually supposed to do, and are sort of trying to let people in the faster class pass, but they sometimes do that in places that are sort of unexpected and just not suited for letting people pass. And it has led to a couple of fairly awkward situations already. So yeah, I guess that's what I probably see as the most common mistake especially in multiclass racing.
Yeah, I have to agree. Especially in terms of multiclass racing, unpredictable traffic is the worst mistake, I guess.
And I guess the only case where you want to be unpredictable is when you're behind someone you want to get them nervous. That's when being unpredictable actually helps. But in no other case, you want to be predictable.
Yeah, you want to sort of be you want to be appearing unpredictable.
Mm-hmm.
You don't necessarily want to be unpredictable.
Okay.
But yeah, you definitely want to make them think you're everywhere.
Okay. I think we're out of time. We had more things we could cover, but we could keep some questions for a follow-up webinar. Any closing words? Any advice generic advices you want to share?
Well, like I say at the very beginning, I'll always make sure you race your own race, your own best race. As long as you keep that in mind, everything else should somewhat come natural.
What do you mean exactly? But by racing your own race?
So don't fight people that lose you a lot of time. Just try to get your fastest race, basically. So just make sure you can do your lap times. At the end of the day, the finishing position is what counts, and more importantly, finishing is what counts.
Mm-hmm.
But you always try to do your best race. So don't get carried away by getting into a fight which will actually lose your positions, and then
Mm-hmm.
you might lose time because you're stuck behind a car, and it's just very easy to go backward if you if you don't do that.
Right. Martin?
I was pretty much going to say the same as Rens did. After all, I guess that's especially true for GT style racing. It's a lot more important to sort of be efficient in your race and sort of optimize it for just race time and getting to the finish as quickly as possible. It's not necessarily important to gain track position if you maybe can be as efficient or even more efficient by just staying behind, but gaining the time in the pits then by just having saved a little bit more fuel or having saved tires or things like that. Maybe for a F1 race that's not necessarily an option, as typically the shorter the race is, the more important it is to gain the track position. But as Rens already said, the top priority should be finishing the race.
Okay, excellent. Thanks a lot, guys. That was very useful information, and I hope the guys on the live stream or the people who are going to watch the recording would find it useful as well. Thanks, and until next time.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.